Just managed to make it to the finish line and my body just collapsed. I had to have CPR.
Let's just backtrack. So you were doing a park run and you collapsed at the end.
And I needed something to help my mindset sort of cope with that. The journey for me was I can't exercise.
I've seen some crazy shit out there with people buying this stuff on TikTok. It's insane.
Oh, everybody's on GLP-1 and right, I'm going to be so slim now. I'll go and get what I want to eat.
What is it? What does it do? How dangerous is it?
When it's used correctly, it can do so much for you.
Did you feel judged or hesitant telling people?
It's kind of a bit isolating, to be honest.
It is a tool. It is not a solution.
I tried one dose on 5 milligrams and it wasn't for me.
Some of these crazy side effects, like you're going to grow a second head, your kidneys are going to explode, like you're going to die. Hello, folks, and welcome to episode 5, would you believe, of Bulletproof Women by Dr. Arm. Now, I am joined with such an absolute wonderful, beautiful person today. And I say that because she has been through a lot of different changes over the last few years. And she's coming on today to talk about quite a sensitive topic, but it's a topic that really is hitting the headlines at the moment. There's a lot of noise around GLP-1 weight loss injections, a lot of hype, but a lot of fear. There's a lot of judgment and there's a lot of scaremongering. And what we hope to do with this episode is really just break down some of those conversations that people are having, but are scared to say out loud. So I am joined by the lovely Emma. She is a content creator online and has been working with or been taking GLP-1 for a few months, or are we talking? How long have you been on GLP-1?
Last year, so yeah, quite a while now.
And she has very kindly come on to talk about her experiences, but also, I guess, to break down some of those barriers that a lot of women are talking about right now, and ultimately to kind of give some information and to, really try and explore what the whole weight loss injection is about. And we're not talking about the sort of crazy 40, 50 kilo weight loss that you're seeing. We're not talking about influencers injecting to look super, super shredded. What we're talking about is health. We're talking about the use of it within health, but also around if you're thinking about what is it? What does it do? Like, should I be taking it? Are there any side effects? How dangerous is it? Is it dangerous at all? There are so many conversations that we need to have around this. Before we dive into this really interesting topic, I'm just going to put a caveat out there that this conversation is purely conversation around experiences and not around medical advice. Always seek medical advice when you are dealing with anything in this area, and always make sure that you seek that advice from reputable doctors. I've seen some crazy shit out there with people buying this stuff on TikTok. It's insane. But Emma, let's start from the beginning. Can you give me a little bit of start from the beginning? Why did you decide to start on weight loss injections, and where did that come from? What was it from?
In May last year, I was running. I did a park run and basically collapsed and had to have CPR. And I'm under investigation still to this.
Hang on, let's just backtrack. So you were doing a park run and you collapsed at the end.
Yeah, so I managed to cross the finish line. I had no symptoms, by the way, about being poorly or anything like that. Just managed to make it to the finish line and my body just collapsed. I was really, really poorly. I basically lost my pulse, my pulse was really low. And I had to have CPR and get rushed to hospital. My troponin levels were really, really high. So I'm still under investigation now. What's that, 10 months later for it. So to me, I was running 5Ks normally. This was only a 5K. And yeah, basically my body just gave up on me there and then. So the journey for me was I can't exercise. I still can't exercise. I haven't had the all clear. And I just needed something. I was sat at home. I was really depressed and fed up. I was eating, putting on weight, and I needed something to help my mindset sort of cope with that without the exercise, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And at what point did that sort of weight management help kind of come into that phase? Like, when did you start sort of having that conversation, that thought process, this there might be a route to go down?
It was a really hot topic on Instagram, and it was like, oh, everybody's on GLP-1, and even I admittedly was a bit like, oh no, that's so silly, because I was so uneducated about it, and all the TikToks out there are really heightened around the wrong things, when actually it's more the underlying issues that people have got that are taking, they shouldn't be taking it, that's the problem, but that's a different that's a different subject. But for me, I was sort of being introduced to this, and I thought, okay, I'll do some research, and I actually had a consultation with a private doctor, because I was so unsure whether it was suitable for my body to take it, because obviously what I'd gone through, I didn't want to risk my body just to lose weight. It wasn't about that. It was about my mind coping with my body changing. Because when you go from, I was working out 3 times a week and I was running, to go from that to nothing, my body was just turning into this big sack of jelly. But my mind couldn't process it. I already struggled with my mental health. But to me, I knew I had to do something. So I had this private consultation, and I was given the all clear to take something like this. I had nothing wrong with my liver or my kidneys, and I was told that they were the two things that if you've got underlying issues with those, you shouldn't be ever on GLP-1.
If we sort of set this in context, you've got 3 boys, 3 beautiful boys, and the youngest one is how old was he at the time?
What? Yeah, one and a bit. Yeah.
So, I mean, you're still in that kind of new mum phase, really, aren't you? I mean, yeah, you've gone through it twice before, but it's, you're still very much in that, crazy whirlwind of you had a baby, hormones are sort of, settling themselves out. And I can imagine you've worked so hard to build confidence, and sort of strength, and then suddenly you can't train, and everything that you've been building towards. And I guess, if I think back to when I was pregnant and I had Mila, I had Archie, and then I kind of always knew I was going to go through it again, and I was very blessed to be able to. And then I had Mila, and I was like, right, it's me time now. I'm going to get that, sort of get myself back to it. And then all of a sudden that's taken away from you, and an element of control is taken away from you, isn't it?
It was horrible. And I remember having the conversation with my husband, because, again, back May last year, it was such a taboo subject. If you look at the difference now on social media, people are more open about it. And that's why I've really come to social media to talk about my journey, because I want to, I'm not saying normalize GLP-1, everybody go out and buy it, but when it's used correctly, it can do so much for you. But I remember that first conversation with Chris, and his reaction was a bit like, are you sure, like, this is a really big thing? And I think he was a bit hesitant. And obviously when I'd had that consultation I think we were on the phone for about an hour with this doctor, and he really reassured me that a lot of the scaremongering is people that are just really uneducated about this product that's out there. I mean, this product's been on the market for 20 years. It's a diabetic product.
Exactly. I mean, we've been using it in diabetes, weight management and maintenance. Obviously, for those of you that are unaware, like GLP-1, some of the things that it helps with are all around, stimulating insulin, lowering glycogen, and effectively just trying to stabilize blood glucose levels, which obviously brings the body into a nice state of homeostasis, and helps the body to kind of function in want of a better word, reduces inflammation, etc., etc. So, there's lots of, the reason it's used to treat a chronic disease, there has medical benefit to it. And I mean, I guess that brings me round to a question that's probably on a lot of women's, the tip of their tongue, I guess, if they're contemplating that. And that's, did you feel judged or hesitant telling people? I mean, you sort of said about your husband, what thought process went through your head when you sort of first started taking it, and, were you openly with people about it?
I think for me, I told a couple of my friends, and I remember having that conversation, and it was a bit kind of like people were sitting back watching other people at this time. This is 10 months ago. And I remember a couple of friends were like, oh, no, be careful. And I kept it to myself a lot. And then it's almost done a 360. Some of my friends are now on it. And that's amazing. And I'm so supportive of their journey. But ultimately, at the time when I did it, I feel like nobody around me was really on it. So it was kind of a bit isolating, to be honest. So for me, having the social media platform, I wanted to use it correctly and share my journey. And I'd say 99% of the comments have been really positive. You do obviously get the odd couple of questionable comments from questionable people, might I add. But on a whole, it's had a really positive effect. And my goal there is mainly to help other women feel supported and feel, that they don't need to be ashamed. It's their journey and they should be able to choose how they want to do that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's a big difference around using it as a quick fix and as a solution, and using it as a tool. And I think, the doctors, and I was at a really interesting talk today about GLP-1 with some doctors who work in lifestyle medicine. And the script is, it is a tool, it is not a solution. And I think, all of the sort of really good positive social media work that you're doing is sending that message. And I think, that's how we need to reframe it. And, I'll be quite honest, like when it first came out, like I was very much, oh my God, just, get to the gym, do a little bit of and it's sort of, it didn't even cross my mind really at that point that it's a tool and it's a starting point. And I think that's kind of really where we need to see it. I guess, you mentioned about this, great long conversation you had with a private doctor. I guess there'll be a lot of women that are still very fearsome of, some of these crazy side effects, like you're going to grow a second head, your kidneys are going to explode, like you're going to die. What sort of concerns and fears did you have when you first started, and how and what did that doctor sort of say to you? Because I guess also you've just had a massive cardiac event, and then a doctor's going, yeah, no worries, you can take this GLP-1, like go for it.
He was actually really reassuring, and he's been a doctor in this hospital for about 23 years. I remember him telling me his background. A friend had recommended me to go for a consultation with this person. And I remember asking all these sort of questions that you were just saying then, what will I eat? How will I know what foods to eat? And, what if I'm sick? And I remember my head just going into overdrive, and it was like, right, let's just calm and just take it like step by step, like everybody. And that's my advice. Everybody will react differently. Like for me, for example, I could never go up to 5. I tried one dose on 5 milligrams and it wasn't for me. I felt so sick, and just the sickly feeling. I felt really full. I knew I wasn't eating, and I felt so out of control that I just thought, why don't I just carry on doing 2.5? I was still losing slowly, because the first 2 weeks you will lose the most you will ever lose in your whole journey. I think I lost 5 and 4, so I lost 9 pounds in the first 2 weeks, and it was amazing. But then your body slowly gets used to it, and as it gets used to it, you get a little bit more of your appetite. So you do have to be in control. Like, it's not something that you can take and go, right, I'm going to be so slim now, I'll go and get what I want to eat. You do have to be mindful and make those better choices. But for me, it was, oh, I couldn't bear that sickly feeling. And I remember him saying to me, don't have, acidic foods. I remember somebody saying to me, like, you'll get really full on the Diet Coke can. So now I sip it slowly. And it's just, it's knowing your body. Like, if I have a Chinese takeaway, I will have literally half the portion and I will suffer the next day, because it just doesn't sit on your stomach right. Yeah, you just learn foods to avoid. Bananas as well was a no-go on GLP-1. Yeah.
I guess also, there's an element of, especially with microdosing, like, you've been very openly, talked about, and that's sort of the journey that you've been on. There's lots of, positive health benefits coming out from that around, reduction in bloating, reducing IBS, headaches, reducing, like, regular bowel movements. And I think, if you look at the sort of research, and certainly, well, the limited research that's out there, but you also speak to some doctors, there's certainly something around what you've just said, and that's, you make better food choices. So actually, the weight is coming off slowly, but it's coming off. But also, there's some real positivity around behavioral change in positive food choices, which are things that potentially could be more, a longevity process, as in you're making those changes, and when you come off the GLP-1, those positive choices are more likely to be habit forming and you continue to do them. So less ultra processed foods, resulting in less inflammation, resulting in reduced headaches, less bloating, less IBS, etc., etc. Is that something that you found yourself?
Absolutely. I actually had a bit of a break around Christmas. I remember talking about this on Instagram. I had a 5 week break just because I forgot to order my next pen and the chaos. And you know what Christmas is like, and everything goes into.
Yeah, for sure. I forgot my GLP-1 because, well, Santa wasn't going to bring it me, and I just forgot because I was, busy with the kids. I love it.
I forgot it. I forgot it. And I remember we went away. We tend to go away in January. It's like our little getaway. And I remember being away on holiday, and I was the most bloated I've ever been. My IBS was back with a vengeance, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" It's because my body. So it takes a couple of weeks to come out of your system. So the first 2 weeks of coming off it, I probably wouldn't have noticed a difference. But because it was like week 4 going into week 5, my body was. I'm not saying to endorse this to take it permanently either. That's, I want to be really clear with that. But for me, it does have so many benefits that I did notice the difference. So when I was away, oh, the IBS and the inflammation, it was so noticeable. And I thought, oh my goodness, like it actually has been doing more than the weight loss. And it just come to light. So I've been sharing that as well. There are so many benefits to it.
When you were away, did your food habits change? So do you think it was the GLP-1, or do you think it was a combination of change in food habits and coming off?
I don't know, because usually, and this is the first time we always go all inclusive, and it's the first time we've ever been self catering. Now, anybody that's gone all inclusive, you know what it's like. You go and have your breakfast because it's there. You go and have 3 puddings at lunch because it's there. So I didn't have that this time. So it wasn't like I was overindulging. We were literally, I was having granola and yogurt for breakfast. I'd probably have like one or two glasses of wine maybe with my dinner, and we weren't excessively drinking by the pool or anything like that. It was just and it was barbecue foods. It was all relatively good eating. It wasn't. I wouldn't say I was overindulging. But yeah, it was really noticeable that it was back, the IBS and the inflammation.
And sort of changing the sort of line of questioning a little bit, like you spoke earlier about confidence and how this kind of was a way of controlling your ability to, alter your body shape and feel more confident in your body whilst you weren't able to train. Did you, at any point, were you given the okay to sort of train whilst taking the GLP-1, or is that still very much kind of up in the air about what you're sort of able to do?
So it's still up in the air. I went to see a consultant not so long ago, and basically I should never have been discharged. It came to light. The hospital had openly admitted that they'd lost my notes, and then when the doctor did review everything, all these tests should have been done in the hospital before I was sent home, and I was sent home as an outpatient for these to be done, and it's taken nearly 9-10 months. So I think had these tests been done sooner, I could have maybe been given the okay sooner. Whereas at this minute in time, they still have 1 or 2 tests to do. So yeah, I'm still not had the green light on everything. Walking is okay, maybe a little jog, but nothing too. I'm not allowed to do anything too strenuous.
And what about, because there's a lot of sort of talk now about obviously the weight loss, but not only weight loss, but also loss of muscle. And a lot of the research that's coming out is showing that the weight is coming off, but that weight is coming off in both fat mass and muscle mass. Were you ever, and did you ever discuss that? Was that something the doctor ever mentioned to you?
See, I've never seen. I don't know if I'm just one of the lucky ones, and I've seen people. They call it the Manjaro burn, and I honestly don't think I've seen that. Like my legs don't feel like they've lost that muscle or anything like. Oh, I haven't got like a pancake burn, as people are saying. So I'm not too worried. It's not something I've given too much thought, to be honest. I mean, I'm constantly on my feet anyway as a mum of 3. I've come home today working all day, and I've just hoovered, mopped. You know what it's like, and you don't really sit down. So I don't know whether that's just maybe in my favour.
Quite possibly, in the fact that you're probably un almost unintentionally, every time you pick, dude up and, carry them around in a way that's resistance training in itself, and so probably there's this sort of unhidden strength training that you're doing that's not perhaps as traditional as going to a gym and, doing a 5x5 back squat sort of thing. And it's interesting because, around that whole strength element, some of the conversations that we're having at the moment, certainly in this sort of fitness landscape, is, I guess, having the confidence to reach out to and almost be, because it's a challenge, right? We as fitness professionals, as practitioners, we are advocates for healthy lifestyle, which includes, trying to avoid medication, not at all costs, but trying to reduce medication where we can if there is an alternative. And I think one thing that's been really interesting over, the last couple of months, and certainly in the last couple of weeks when I've been having more conversations around this, and that's that research is now coming out showing that, when you stop abruptly taking weight loss injections, GLP-1, then the regain is around 2/3 of what's been lost, which is insane. When you stop abruptly, but you have introduced some sort of strength training and increase the amount of protein you're eating to sort of counteract muscle loss, then the regain is a lot less. It's around 1/3 to sort of, well, between 20 and 40%. But what's really interesting, and I think, this is something that you're a big advocate of, and that's when you slowly taper or you're microdosing, what's actually happening is you're having lifestyle change alongside. And therefore, the incidence of regain when you slowly taper off is almost nothing. Like it's very minor, which I think really does open conversations.
Yeah. Well, for example, when I had that 5 week break over Christmas, you've got to, 5 weeks over Christmas, you've got all your Christmas dinner, you've got your family over. I mean, there was a bit of drink involved in there. There was parties. Then we went away for a week. So you could, you think all of that. I think I put 5 pounds on. Now, just to add as well, I really suffer, as you know, with PMDD. So my hormones for certainly 2 weeks of the month can be so horrific that the fluctuation in my water retention can mean that I put on three to 4 pounds, believe it or not, and drop it again. So, when I weighed myself, I was like, oh wow, that's really not that much in the grand scheme of things, because I think it was that part of my cycle that I'd weighed myself. So in terms of the gain, because I've done it slowly and very low dose, it's not like I've shocked my body and then just gained everything back again. So yeah, I think microdosing has definitely done wonders for it.
And again, that's hitting the nail on the head. It's doing it safely, doing it appropriately, and getting feedback from your own body. You tried, to go up to 5 mils, and it didn't work. It was just not for you. And I think that's the real message we're sort of getting across there, isn't it? Is have the support, know your body, and do it for the right reasons.
So a lot of the women come into my inbox and they were saying, oh, I'm on 5 and I'm really struggling. What would you recommend? And, I'm just starting. There's so much uncertainty about people. And my advice to all of these people that have messaged me has only ever been like, try it. Like, it's not worked for me, but I've heard so many people that I know that are on 5 mg and they've gone to do amazing and it's worked for them. So if anybody's listening to this and they're really intrigued to start their journey, then please just do what's right for you. Don't do something because somebody else on social media is doing that. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for your body. So I think that's such a key thing. And drinking lots of water, like my body is not used to drinking tons and tons of water. So I drink what I feel is right for me. Whereas I know some people, if they don't, they don't drink tons and tons of water, they collapse. So again, I think just making sure that you're hydrating your body enough and you're doing what's right for you.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think, if there's one message that I really am an advocate of, and that's, individuality. Everybody's different, everyone's context different. Like, as women, we should be supporting one another on these journeys. And, everybody has different reasons for doing this. Yours is obviously quite an extreme reason, but you wanted to have that confidence in your body, and this was the way and the tool to give you a little bit of control back and a little bit of confidence back. Just sort of, it kind of, closing in, I guess, on, the whole journey. Looking back, would you do the same again? Is there anything that you'd do differently? Is there anything you'd change?
because I think I've learned along the way. I think I wouldn't, I mean, I do look at other people's journeys. Admittedly, we all compare. And, I've got a friend who lives in Dubai and she's lost, gosh, nearly 4 stone and she looks unreal. And I think, oh, wished I'd lost 4 stone. But then I think, well, my body probably didn't, doesn't, we're all different, aren't we? We're all different shapes and sizes. So I think,
Absolutely.
for me, I've lost 2 stone. I sometimes look in the mirror and go, oh, I don't really look much different. But then when I look at pictures, I have to remember the journey I've come on. So I think we get so complacent with how we look that we get used to our body image. So that's something else I think people should really take into effect. Look how far you've come, do it slowly, build it up, just make sure you're seeing that difference, because otherwise it can become, a little bit toxic maybe.
And a bit overwhelming as well, a bit overwhelming, like you say, and comparison is the thief of joy, as they say, isn't it?
Yeah.
But no, I
And
wouldn't
also,
I
I'm
wouldn't
sorry.
change. I wouldn't change anything. Like, I think I'm happy with how I've done everything, and I'm glad that I've opened up about my journey, because I do, even if it helps one woman. I've had a couple of women come through my inbox lately say, "Oh, thank you so much for sharing your journey. I was so scared to talk about it, and I had nobody around me. And, none of my family knew about it, and that must be so isolating for that poor girl. So the fact
And
that
I think
she's reached out to me is amazing."
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, what would be your sort of line of advice? Like if you say like one sentence to women who are feeling ashamed about even considering the option, what would your sort of advice be to them, or what would you say to them?
I just say it's your life. You can't live your life through someone else's eyes. You have to do it because it's right for you and it's the journey that you want to do. And I think ultimately own it. And that's what I've really taught myself the last few months, sharing everything on my social media is, you're not going to please everybody. So you may as well please yourself.
No, I love that. You're not going to please everyone, so you may as well please yourself. I love that. I love that. And just being honest with you, being honest with yourself. And I think the sort of last thing for me is, you know, women should not feel weak for needing support. And
Absolutely.
like we say, that this is a tool. It's not a life changing solution to everything. There is still work to be done. Whilst you're on it, and I'm sure, as soon as you are able to, you're going to be wanting to get straight back in that gym, straight back to your running.
I've already messaged Jace. I mean, I just started going to PT sessions with Jace, who's my coach, and we were in such a good place, and there were so many changes, and I was going 3 mornings a week, and I loved it. It was really good for my mental health. And then obviously when that changed and I couldn't go, obviously, Jace was there supporting me. I was updating him. I still update him now, not quite given the green light, but he's kept my space, and my space is there for when I'm good to go back. So I am really looking forward to that, because I think my mental health has definitely suffered from not having that exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so thank you so much, Emma, for coming on. And this is a topic which it is sensitive. But the more we can talk about it, and the more we've got fantastic advocates and inspirational women out there like yourself who've been on some journey, the more I think it gives people confidence to reach out to you, but also to just like you say, to take control and do them, like you do you. And this isn't this isn't a sort of conversation, an episode about convincing anyone to use medication, to go on, weight loss, weight loss medication. But it's also not about scaring anyone away from it.
No.
I guess it's just about giving a little bit of clarity. And, one of the big things with Bulletproof, our first line is always about building capacity, building strength, building confidence, building resilience. But for some women, that, in this context means medication can sit alongside
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
And it, it's used as a tool. And I think, support in the way that you give it, in the way that I can give it from an exercise, practitioner's perspective, by helping them with the exercise alongside, that removes, that's removing shame, and education removes fear. So, the confidence that we're bringing doesn't come from shrinking. It comes from, supporting one another. And as we know on Bulletproof, it's all about not being smaller. It's about being stronger, more resilient, and ultimately as women, more bulletproof. So thank you so much,
Right.
Emma.
Thanks for
It's been an
having me.
absolute pleasure to talk to you. And thank you so much for sharing your journey with us.